Metal Mike here, and welcome to Hair Mania on the 80's Glam Metalcast. We talk in depth about the genre and the book, The Spectacular Rise, Fall, and Rebirth of Hair Metal, with its author, Christopher Hilton. Here's what we talk about. Motley Crue's Theater of Pain. Is it one of their worst albums, or was it the blueprint that hair bands used in the 80s to be successful? The importance of albums that came out in the key years, 1986 and 1989. We also talk about how some of the era's biggest albums, like Appetite for Destruction, Look What the Cat Dragged In, and Hysteria, took nearly a year to really break big. At the end, play along with Chris and I as we go head-to-head in hair metal trivia. See who gets crowned to be the ultimate hair metal nerd. There's so many hair metal factoids revealed, it'll blow your mind. Check it out. Well, Chris, welcome to the 80's Glam Metalcast. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm fine, Mike. Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, man. Glad that you could come on. Well, let's talk about the book, man. Your book is The Rise, Fall, and Rebirth of Hair Metal. Man, this book's awesome. It's very thorough. What kind of research went into putting something like this together?
Oh, gosh. Quite a bit and not quite a bit at the same time. One of the things I wanted to make sure about the book was that it actually wasn't written from the standpoint of a researcher. Right? I didn't want it to be something where, people could just get from the book what they got on Wikipedia. Any researcher could do that and recount what happened. I really wanted it to be told from a fan's point of view. Right? I wanted to offer something more than what just happened from a fact standpoint and offer some opinions around it, even though, opinions may be the scourge of fact-based biographies. But as far as research, I was lucky being such a Uber fan. Most of this stuff has been intimately bouncing around in my head for decades now. It's simply a matter of each year looking at among the 2,000 CDs up in the den, what music was released and trying to remember the stories about it and re-listening to the albums and going through some old magazines and pulling out some quotes and some stories that I thought would be of good interest. So really it was just a brain dump of everything that's been going on for the last, 30 years in the genre.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. You just mentioned the quotes. Yeah, how did you find all those quotes? I mean, you're digging through old metal edges. How are you finding all these quotes?
Well, my brain's kind of funny. It seems I don't remember much stuff other than hair metal stories and quotes. I'm kind of blessed and cursed at the same time. As I was thinking about each album, I would remember back in, I probably read every issue of, Metal Edge, Hit Parader, and all those magazines back in the 80s and 90s. And, each morning, the first thing I do, because I'm crazy, is wake up and, read all the hair metal blogs, websites. So it was really a matter of saying, hey, I remember this guy saying this or that, or this band saying that, or I remember reading this. But then I did have to go back and kind of type those words in and get the exact quote because I didn't want to misquote anybody. But since I always find reading about this so interesting, most of the quotes I would remember, especially when I was looking at a song or how an album got made or what an artist was going through or a band that had a breakup or a reunion or something like that. I always seem to remember what was going on and what they said, so I just had to make sure I quoted it properly.
Now, right toward the beginning of the book, you talk about hair metal, and I love how you broke down the term, that you didn't necessarily agree with the term, but you realized that this is pretty much, what this movement is known as now. And, I grew up on it too. I think you and I are about the same age, and I embrace it, the hair metal thing. It's like, I look back and some people say 80's rock. Well, to me, 80's rock is Huey Lewis, and 80's metal could be Priest or Dio. So, there's so many things that, where does this fit? And I think just hair metal sums it up, Yeah,
absolutely. It's a polarizing term for sure, right? There's been many a heated debate and discussion anytime it gets brought up among anyone who considers themselves even remotely a fan of the genre. The first sentence in the first chapter of the book, as I'm sure you've seen, says, I have a confession to make. I hate the term hair metal, right? And if this is true, why in the world would I, use it as the title of the book? And it's really for what you said. I was looking for a universal identifier of the type of music within, just to be clear to the audience. I could have used the term glam metal, but then maybe people would have thought the book was about David Bowie or Alice Cooper or the New York Doll.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's so much better, right? Glam is glamour, is fashion, is hair, perhaps. I could have used heavy metal, which is exactly what this stuff was referred to in the 80s. And people are surprised that weren't around during that time. The term hair metal wasn't even invented until years after the genre's heyday.
Right.
Maybe the early to mid 90s. believe it or not, back in 1987, Poison was heavy metal. Everything was heavy metal.
Yep.
Hair metal wasn't invented as a term until really after grunge, when people needed a more disparaging, pejorative term. Hair metal implying that the genre was incredible or about the music, and it was all about hair and style and no substance. And, bands and fans, we hated it because for the most part, it just wasn't true. Most of these were highly skilled musicians, and the music was in generally much harder to play and sing than grunge. Even take a band like Poison, or take the guitarist CeCe DeVille, kind of a signature goofball, and hair metal poster boy. But CeCe DeVille trained them to the great Effect Perlman, right? Or bands like Winger. These are classically trained musicians.
Yep.
It can generate a lot of discussion. But at the end of the day, I kind of cringed. But I said, hey, if I want people to know exactly what this book is about, for better or worse, when people say hair metal, you generally know what you're going to get, right? You're going to get Motley Crue, Poison, Guns N' Roses, Skid Row, Warrant Rat, all these bands. And, apologies to these bands because, I've somewhat grown to acquiesce the fact that the term is less of a derogative term these days. It's more of a happily nostalgic term for many, and we just use it as a convenience. But, the bands have not necessarily reached that same place, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, right.
If you say hair metal to Sebastian Bach, he's likely to try and rip your stomach out through your throat, or many of the others. So I get that. So again, apologies to them, but for better or worse, it was a universal identifier, and I choose to view it as something that is not its derogative intention.
Well, I got to say, man, I kind of went into this book a little bit cocky, thinking like, I know all this stuff. I was there through all of it. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of stuff in this book that I did not know. I won't reveal what the things are. I'll let the people buy the book and find out what they are. But you uncovered a lot of cool facts.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's just the benefit of being such a fan, right? I mean, this is, again, call me crazy, but this is what I've immersed myself in as a hobby for I guess ever since the early 80s. If it's what you do, you tend to pick up a lot of things along the way.
And there's things in the book that you kind of forget about as the years go on. And one thing that you touch on for a couple different bands is how it was a slow rise to success, especially with GNR and Poison. And I think sometimes you take that for granted. You think of these guys were right out of the gate really huge, but probably with both of those albums almost took a year for them to really take off, which I kind of forgot that,
Yeah, it's kind of revisionist history sometimes. People take an album, you mentioned Guns N' Roses, like Appetite for Destruction, the biggest selling debut album of all time, and I think, okay, this must have came out, and Welcome to the Jungle was on the radio, and it was a huge hit. And you're right, that's not what happened by any stretch of the imagination. And it was a different time, right? I mean, now, if a group comes out and gets marketed, if you don't have a hit right away, it's not like the record company is investing in you. Back in the 80s, bands would get 2 or 3 albums to establish an audience and a platform to get developed. And it was different. But yeah, Appetite for Destruction was probably a full year before it hit. Bizarrely, the first single was It's So Easy, which was a strange choice because, as far as actual vocal register, singing that very low register, which is not indicative of the rest of the album. The band spent a ton of money on a video that was so graphic that MTV, of course, banned it. The song's full of fairly offensive language, so the radio wouldn't play it. On some notes, you have to question the decision. But Appetite for Destruction, the record company had basically given up on that record until the manager took, called in one last favor and begged MTV to play the video for Welcome to the Jungle just once, and they agreed reluctantly. It played, I think, at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. I don't remember. It was one of those on a Sunday morning, no less. And as it turned out, people were watching. According to MTV's, stories or logs or whatever, the switchboard just lit up, and that was what caused the album to take off. But it almost got overlooked. The record company actually wanted them to go back in and start on a second album, and they were ready to give up.
Isn't that crazy?
The same thing with Hysteria, right? How many singles from Hysteria was released before Pour Some Sugar on Me hit? That was almost another full year. Women was released as a single, didn't do anything, even though they probably should have released Animal as the first single like they did in the UK. Then they wised up and released Animal. It did nothing. It wasn't until the B-side, Pour Some Sugar on Me, was errantly played by a radio station, and that made the album take off.
Yeah, it's funny. The record companies get it wrong a lot. And in doing the podcast and talking to all these guys, you'll hear a lot of different stories about that where the label, wants to do this one, do that one, and then they're ready to give up. One that comes to mind when you were talking, it made me remember, it was Kix. With Blow My Fuse. They put out, I think, 3 singles, and they pretty much were done with the album. And I think it was Guns N' Roses' manager that really pushed for, Alan Niven, pushed for Don't Close Your Eyes to be released. And they listened to him because it was Guns N' Roses' manager. I think it was also Great White's manager. And, and it blew up. You know what I mean? So here it is that, once again, the label's ready to give up on these guys, but here's this awesome hit that they're kind of overlooking. And this, like I said, we've all read these stories, heard these stories a million times. The record companies get it wrong a lot.
Yeah, Kix was actually on tour with Great White when Alan Nevin heard that song. And he said, oh, my God, it happened to be a friend of the record company called him and said, hey, you guys have a massive hit on your hands here if you would just take a look at it. But you're right, he doesn't make that phone call, and that's probably it, right? And people don't know Kix.
Yeah, right. I know, it's crazy. There's a section in the book about Theater of Pain. In your opinion, how important is that album for Motley Crue and for the genre entirely?
Well, I'm not going to make a lot of fans here because the Theater of Pain, I guess if you asked 100 Motley Crue fans outside of Generation Swine or anything they did in the late 90s or after that, the majority of them are probably going to say that's Motley Crue's worst album. Even Nikki Sixx will say that this is Motley Crue's worst album. And it was created under some difficult times. Certainly, Vince with his jail sentence and trying to get sober and coming off the accident. And Nikki was beginning to suffer from his heroin addiction. The songs perhaps weren't there as they were with Shout at the Devil or a really innovative album like Too Fast for Love. So it doesn't really catch a lot of fan enthusiasm, not to mention that the 2 hit singles from it are kind of anomalous to everything else in the album. Smoking in the Boys' Room, a cover of the Brownfield Station song, it isn't really, what you would think Motley Crue. And then Home Sweet Home, the ballad at the time, power ballads weren't popular, really until after Home Sweet Home.
Right.
So, not a lot of Motley Crue fans are really enthusiastic about that album, but I like it a lot. Not necessarily because I recognize it as some amazing, piece of orchestration or songwriting, but it was one of the first albums I had heard from the era, so it will always hold a special place for me. And I think if you take it for just what it was, right, just a, bare bones, nuts and bolts rock and roll album, I think it's got a lot to offer as far as the guitar tone and the nastiness of some of the songs. But I'm alone in that, I promise you. You won't find many people that agree with me, and I get where they're coming from.
I know somebody that's going to agree with you, me, because that's also one of my first purchases for this genre, the hair metal genre, and I really think this created the mold which a lot of bands copied after with the videos. Obviously everybody wanted to do that tour, ballad video, all that kind of stuff. That I feel like they really, with the look. This is when I feel like bands started copying whatever Motley Crue was doing image-wise, starting here and then all the way to Dr. Feelgood. So I think this was kind of like beginning of their reign as one of the top hair metal bands. I love the album, too. And once again, I get it. There are some weak songs, but this is, for me, it's got great deep tracks. And I'm a big fan of the deep tracks, and I especially love like Use It or Lose It, Fight for Your Rights, and Save Our Souls. I like songs like that. So, I love that album. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I skipped Smoking in the Boys' Room, I admit. I like the deeper tracks as well. I mean, commercially, it was huge for them. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it saved their career. They without the hit singles on that record, their career could have been over, to be honest. I mean, Smoking in the Boys' Room allowed them to be on MTV and allowed them to get in people's living room and expanded their audience. And then Home Sweet Home, of course, largely brought the female into the equation.
Yep.
So even 2 hit singles saved their career. And as far as trends and people copying, I mean, Motley Crue was kind of unique in that they changed their image, at least during the 80s, for every album.
Yep.
And Theater of Pain, people saw as a sellout because they were used to the nastiness of Shout at the Devil and the leather, and then all of a sudden the guys are wearing pink pants and makeup. And then on Girls, 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 of course, they ditched all that for the motorcycles and the leather jackets and strip clubs. And then Dr. Feelgood was a different step in another direction. But commercially, it was huge for them.
Yeah. And when and once again, you might know the timeline better than I do, but I look at it like Theater of Pain came out, right? And then all of a sudden Dokken looked exactly like that. Kiss looked exactly like, you know what I mean? So I feel like every time Crue did one of these things, I feel like so many other bands followed, image-wise.
Oh, absolutely. I think indeed they were trendsetters, at least in the 80s. They might not have carried that throughout the rest of their career,
no.
But in a lot of ways, Nikki Sixx was setting the trends back then.
Yeah, I think so too. And 86, if we talk about that for a minute, is just a huge year. I mean, you think you got the debut of Poison, you've got Europe Final Countdown, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, Night Songs, Eat 'Em and Smile. And this was, like I said, this was my year. It sounds like it was your year too. This is the year I'm getting into the albums that were probably released in 85 and in 86. So, I mean, a lot to consume at this point.
Oh, absolutely. 86 was really the year, the hair metal truly broke through as a commercial force.
Yep.
I mean, there were albums before that, certainly. There was Quiet Riot, Metal Health, and Come On Feel the Noise. That was the first #1 heavy metal album. It knocked the Police's Synchronicity out of the #1 spot of all things. And, of course, Van Halen had been there since 78. Rat was all over MTV with Round and Round in 84, and Twisted Sister had the big videos, the commercial big videos earlier than that. And, of course, Dokken was there and Pyromania. But in 86, it was Slippery When Wet.
Yep.
And that was it, right? I mean, 12 million copies, and, Bon Jovi had the full female audience. They had the male audience. They had Living on a Prayer. They had Wanted Dead or Alive. That was it. After that album, there was no stopping hair metal or heavy metal at the time from being a truly dominant force. And, of course, Poison had their debut, and Cinderella, and to your point, David Lee Roth had his solo record, and Van Halen's 5150, somehow they were bigger than ever. And from there, 87 all the way up through 1990, this was a commercially and culturally dominant thing.
Yeah.
No way around it.
You spent a lot of time in the book talking about 1989, and I think this is probably my favorite year of the 80s for music, because I feel like this is the peak. It's also the beginning of the end, but I think we could go through a few of them, but man, I think this is a great year for hair metal.
Yeah, it sounds like we have very similar tastes. It's probably my favorite year as well, and I think it was the peak before the genre started to become a little saturated, a little duplicative, a little copycatish, but there were some huge records. There was Motley Crue hit their commercial peak with Dr. Feelgood. There were some great new bands on the scene. Skid Row and Warrant were basically overnight sensations.
Yeah, great albums.
Whitesnake had Slip of the Tongue. Even Aerosmith was at the peak of their comeback with the Pump album. And then there were tons of new bands, right? You couldn't sneeze and not hit a hair metal album. They sang Tango, Britney Fox, Danger Danger, Extreme. Not all these bands necessarily fit the hair metal mold when they talk about brands like Extreme or Bang Tango. But they were certainly all marketed as such.
Yeah, and I'm going to go over a few that you touch on in the book, because these are ones where once I saw these albums pop up, I got very excited because I like these albums a lot. So the first one that I got excited about was Slip of the Tongue. A lot of people don't talk highly always of Slip of the Tongue, but I love Steve Vai's presence on that album. I love when he kind of gets reeled in, because we know Steve Vai was with Zappa. He can get kind of out there, but when he reels it in and comes into the hard rock arena, I just feel like it works, because it's still out there and unique, but it fits with David Lee Roth or Whitesnake. So I love Slip of the Tongue. I love it.
Yeah, we're not in the majority there again. Kind of
no, we're not.
Theater and Pain. The true Whitesnake fans, they could barely tolerate 1987.
Right.
Because before that, of course, Whitesnake was more, especially in the 70s and early 80s, more of just a rock and roll blues band. And then with Slide It In, they started to venture into what we call that hair metal style. And, of course, by the 1987 self-titled album, it was full-blown hair metal, no doubt about it. And, a lot of people saw that as Whitesnake selling out. Of course, that's also when they attracted their large majority of fans.
Oh, yeah.
But when people heard Slip of the Tongue, for most of them, that was just too far in the other direction. It was full-blown pyrotechnics, overblown production, sing in the highest register you possibly can, get the biggest, longest guitar solos. And so people didn't like what they thought was the legitimacy or the authenticity of that. Personally, to your point, I liked it. I thought Steve Vai brought a lot to that album. People didn't see him as a good fit necessarily for Whitesnake, because he was really on that flashy side and that, There can't be too much in the guitar playing, whereas the Whitesnake fans were coming from a different place in a lot of ways, from just a general blues-based type of rhythm. But I thought Steve brought a lot to that record. Granted, it's an exception in the Whitesnake catalog. There's nothing else exactly like that. By the time they hit Restless Heart, a few years later, it was back to more of that really blues rock. But I enjoy listening to it. I enjoyed it then. I enjoy it now.
Another one that I really love that you touch on is Pretty Boy Floyd, Leather Boys with Electric Toys. And I feel like that album has aged so well. I definitely enjoyed it a lot when I was younger when it came out. But, man, something about over the years, I just think I like it now more than ever. I just think that's a great hair metal album. Incredible.
It's definitely my favorite guilty pleasure. Pretty Boy Floyd is, you either love them or you don't. I'll just put it that way. For me, I love them. I just love the style. I love what they're going for. A lot of people are going to look at that album cover, and they're never going to listen to it. Yep. Even at the time, that album cover probably was a little not so great. But I just love them to death. I've seen Pretty Boy Floyd in concert more times than I could count, and if I could see one band tomorrow, it would probably be them, because I just think they're a lot of fun, and I love the melodies and the music. And Steve Summers, for me, is the voice of glam metal, as far as I'm concerned. Again, I understand for some, his voice can be an acquired taste, but I think he's terrific, and I think what they did was fantastic for what they're aiming to do. I love the record.
Another one that I was so excited to see covered was Boys in Heat, Brittany Fox, because in my opinion, this is a superior album compared to the debut. And it's funny, I interviewed Johnny D, and he wasn't a big fan of this album, the drummer of Brittany Fox. He thought the album title was goofy. He didn't like the sound of the drums. He thought there was too many songs. But you know what? I freaking love that album.
It was a long album. There was a lot of songs. And yeah, the debut sold better, for sure. But to your earlier point, that was when albums, even though a lot of bands' sophomore albums, I thought, were a jump up in quality, that was when they started, to have the sales drop off. So even though that album, or take an album of the same time frame like Danger Danger, Screw It, I thought that was an improvement over their debut. They weren't matching the sale just because the genre was on its way to the other side. But I do enjoy that as well. I got to admit, I'm probably preferential to Bite Down Hard.
Yeah, Bite Down Hard is good too. And that's
Susie Dean had left.
Yep. And that's where, I think once we get to 91, 92, 93, I think I started to realize as I'm reading the book, like how much I love some of those later era hair metal albums, maybe even better than the ones they did, 4 or 5 years earlier. I love, like you said, Bite Down Hard, Dog Eat Dog, Main Attraction. If these hair metal fans don't know what bands we're talking about, then they're not true fans. They should just shut off the podcast. Exposed, Native Tongue, Coverdale Page, Psycho Schizophrenia. Those are kick-ass albums, and I think not all the ones that I mentioned, but some of them show where the genre could have went if record companies were still going to support this, because these guys were evolving. Winger Pull, that's another one too. But these guys were evolving and really taking it into a cool direction, but unfortunately it just wasn't being, I guess nurtured is the only thing I could think of. Nobody was supporting this genre anymore. Yeah,
the window was closed, no doubt about it, when grunge hit. But you're right, a lot of those albums in the early 90s were some of the band's best work. A lot of people will tell you that Dog Eat Dog is Lawrence's best album.
Yep.
And I think it has a lot going for it in terms of musicianship and songwriting. Personally, I did prefer the style, the more hair metal style of the first two records.
Yeah.
But I certainly recognize, what they were doing on Dog Eat Dog. Pull is, probably unquestionably Winger's best album. Native Tongue offered a lot in terms of, real bluesy songwriting. What else was that? Vicious Circle. I only done the Vicious Circle album in '94, right?
Love
that was
one.
A powerful album.
Love it. Oh, I got one beef with you though, because I gotta ask you. One of my favorite bands is Kiss. There's not a lot of Kiss in this. Why is there not much Kiss in this book?
How can there not be Kiss in this book, right? What is wrong? What is the problem?
I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, first thing I got to tell you is the first draft of this book, believe it or not, was about 800 pages.
Okay, all right.
Because I was intent from the very. It was 800 pages. I was intent to make this the comprehensive Bible about hair metal. And then I sat down and I said, oh my God, no one's, not even the most ardent fan is going to want to read 800 pages about hair metal. And so thus began the very long process of cutting out a whole lot of it. And it was torturous because, a lot of these bands that I had to cut the coverage back or even some omit, I love these bands. And difficult decisions had to be made. So what I really tried to do was focus on, when people think about hair metal, they generally think about bands that originated in the 80s.
Yeah.
So with the exception of maybe Aerosmith or Van Halen, who, neither of them fit the hair metal mold very well anyway. But Kiss, they started in 1973. There was the prominence in the mid to late 70s. And no doubt about it, a lot of the hair metal template, the fashion, the party songs, the melodic hard rock, the guitar riffs, the showmanship, that comes from Kiss.
Yep.
And if you ask any hair metal band, they're going to tell you Kiss, or 19 out of 20 of them are going to tell you Kiss are their heroes. And that's not to say Kiss didn't evolve to more the hair metal standard in the 80s. Right? They took the makeup off in 83. They did Lick It Up. And if you listen to songs like Heaven's on Fire or Tears Are Falling or Crazy Crazy Nights, this is hair metal. 1989 Hot in the Shade album at the peak of the genre with the power ballads Forever, or the anthem like Warren sounding like Rise to It. These are hair metal songs. So apologies, the Kiss don't get a lot of press in the book. They certainly get their necessary call out as forefathers and influences of the genre.
Yeah.
But I tried to keep it focused on those bands that really emerged in the 80s.
That makes sense, Chris. And the thing that I thought of is that these albums are covered very heavily in a lot of different books that are out there. So it probably, like you said, probably wasn't really necessary to get too deep into Kiss, because there's whole books dedicated to Kiss, tons of books.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got any plans to write another book at some point?
A couple of people have asked me that question. And because there's so much material I had to cut out, I would love to do more writing about it, especially the years after 2000, right? Because then once we got, the rise in the 80s, the fall in the 90s, and a legitimate type of rebirth at the turn of the century, that was really the story arc of the book. And then I think I took the last 50 or so pages, maybe 70 pages, to talk about, what these bands have been doing since the year 2002 all the way up to 2019, and some of the new wave of hair metal, especially the bands from overseas that have emerged in the last decade or so. But it was only 70 pages. I could have read another 400 pages on those bands. And maybe I'd love to tell people about that, assuming people would want to hear it. But no, I have no plans to write a sequel outside of overwhelming demand for one, which I don't think is going to be the case.
Well, you never know, man. Well, hey, we were talking a little bit before we did this interview, and we thought it was a cool idea to maybe do a little bit of trivia against each other. You're probably going to smoke me because you did all this research and you wrote a book. So why don't we start it off? Why don't you go first? You're my guest. You go first. Hit me with your trivia question. We'll just go every other, and we'll see how we do.
Okay. Hey, it sounds like fun. I had fun thinking about this. I was actually walking the dog this morning and thinking what I could come up with that would hopefully be answerable, but still might, provide the audience with a few decent anecdotes. I'll just try and start off with an easy one.
All right. Sounds good.
I hope it's an easy one. I want to make you look good.
Don't make me look bad on my podcast.
Well, you've read the book, or at least some of it. So some of these are in the book. So
okay.
If you read closely, you'll be good to go. If you
okay.
studied up. Talk about a band called Heaven's Edge.
Yeah.
And I see that you had this lead singer, Mark Evans, on your show back in May. I can't wait to listen to it. I just saw that today.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the band. Love their debut. What most people don't know is that outside of their debut in 1990, Heaven's Edge actually had mostly a full second album, very polished demos in the can around 1992. But with the advent of grunge and other things, it wasn't fully finished and released until 1998. What was the name of that second album?
Oh, I should know this. And it's funny because we talked about this on the podcast, and I think they were initially picked up by Capitol Records, but then with the grunge and everything, it fell through. And I know, what? I can't think of what it is. So you got me. What is it?
It's on the tip of your tongue, I'm sure. It's Some Other Place, Some Other Time.
Some Other Place, Some Other Time. I knew it was like a lot of words, but I could not place what it is. Okay. You got me. You're winning. Okay. All right. Well,
I don't want to win this.
It's totally fine. Okay. So I'm a big Lillian Axe nut, and everybody who listens to my podcast or follows me on Twitter, I'm always talking about Lillian Axe. So, what famous rocker produced Lillian Axe's debut album?
Boy, I like Lillian Axe too. I'm a huge fan of the Psycho Schizophrenia album.
Oh, me too.
And of course, Love and War. Love and War is a classic.
Amazing.
But the debut, I don't know.
That was Robin Crosby.
I don't think I ever knew that. Is that true?
Yeah, man. Yeah. There was a lot of ties. I think they were managed by the same management that managed Rat, and that's how that relationship came in. But yeah, they were definitely. If you got that album, check it out. It's Robin Crosby.
I will. Yes. Hey, that was a good one. Okay. Nice. Very nice.
All right, man. You're up, Chris.
Okay. So the name Tawny Kitaen rings a bell with you, correct?
Yes.
Of course. Who could forget? The famous model appeared in several Whitesnake videos in the late 80s, including Still of the Night, Is This Love, Deep of the Love, Fool for Your Loving, and the famous Here I Go Again. This was the woman, for those listening, if you don't know, that was doing the splits on the hood of the Jaguar in the Here I Go Again video. So any teenage male that grew up on hair metal in the 80s knows Tawny Kitaen. She was actually briefly even married to Whitesnake lead singer David Coverdale. But some fans may be surprised to know that these weren't her first appearances in popular hair metal videos. What was the first hair metal video she appeared in?
I don't know if it's the first, but she's in Rat's Back for More.
Wonderful. Very impressive.
Ha ha! I got one, finally.
Very. There's a bonus part to that question.
Okay.
What was her real name?
Oh, that I don't know.
I actually didn't know that either until today. It's Julie Kitaen.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
People know I have no obsession with Tawny Kitaen. I just thought that was an interesting tidbit.
That is good. Well, I'm glad I finally got one. Okay, so here's one. You like Pretty Boy Floyd. Who was the original Pretty Boy Floyd guitarist who was out of the band once the debut came out, but he was back in the band in 1991? Do you know who this guy is?
Is that Ariel Styles?
Ariel Styles. Nice, Chris. That's a rare one. Good job, man. Good job.
Well, he wrote all the songs.
He did write all the songs. Yep. A lot of people probably don't know that. So.
Yeah, in fact, you're familiar with the band Shameless, correct?
Yes.
So Shameless is still putting songs in the records that Styles wrote.
No kidding. Dude, I'm trying to find that guy. I'd love to have him on the podcast, but I don't know where the hell he is. He's hard to find.
He's underground, but certainly a talented songwriter for sure.
Yep. What else you got?
Okay. So good. At least I got one. If I miss all the others, I'll have that. I can sleep.
We're 1 for 1. We're tied. I like it.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about Van Halen.
Or
more specifically, David Lee Roth.
Okay.
So David Lee Roth split with Van Halen after issuing his platinum-selling cover song solo EP in 1985. And then, of course, he immediately begun work on his movie project, which was to be a musical with him starring in the lead role. CBS Films had actually greenlit the movie with a $20 million budget, and it was more than 90% complete when it was suddenly scrapped at the 11th hour due to a consolidation of CBS studios. Now, of course, the songs for this movie that were going to be the soundtrack turned into Eat 'Em and Smile, and the videos, the colorful videos for that album, used many of the movie's set pieces and props. What was the unreleased movie's name?
Was it Crazy from the Heat?
It was.
Wow. As soon as you said Van Halen, I got nervous because I like Van Halen, but I'm not like the biggest Van Halen fan. And then when you said Roth, I'm like, okay, I like Roth a lot. So I thought maybe I could get it. Okay, good. And I think I think I knew that from the book. So I really owe the answer to you. So. Okay, I got one for you. It's Heaven's Edge related. Now, you may not know the answer to this, but I think if you guess, you should be able to get it. So, Heaven's Edge was filming a second video for their debut album, but because of grunge and everything that was going on, the plug got pulled. Any idea what that song was going to be?
I think the first video was Skin to Skin,
Yep.
if I remember right.
Yep.
And then I think they wanted to come out with a more melodic kind of pop rock tune for the second video. What was the third song on that record? It was oh gosh, what was it? Find Another Way.
That's it, man. You got it. Ding, 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 ding.
That's the one they wanted. They thought that could really get some more radio play.
Yeah.
And yeah, unfortunately, the record company had given up. I think they actually wanted that as the first single.
Yeah.
And the record company chose like the heavier, more quote unquote heavy metal Skin to Skin. I do remember that video, but yeah, I remember Mark saying that they really wanted to Find Another Way.
Yep. Now, one thing that you say in your book, you mentioned how there were replacement players in White Lion in 1991, but you didn't mention their names. You probably know their names. So what are their names? Oh, I'm going again too. I'm sorry. You get to do two next.
Okay, right. So I'll have to noodle on that. Let's think. It was the two guys they had picked up to the European tour,
Yes.
wasn't it? Because I think they went over with the two replacements. And I have read who they were. Maybe I haven't, because if you say I recognize them, I probably remember. But I don't know off the top of my head. Who was it?
Okay, so it was Jimmy DeGrasso, who was in Y&T, and then it was Tommy Caradona. I think they call him like T-Bone. He was in Alice Cooper, and he was in Lita Ford.
Okay, DeGrasso I knew, but I didn't know the second one. Yeah, that didn't work out so well when they went over to Europe, did it?
All right, man. Well, I jumped in and I did too, so you can hit me with two.
Okay, all right. So let's go to Bon Jovi. Legendary 1986 song, "Living on a Prayer." Quite possibly the single most enduring song from the genre's heyday for most people. Famously featured the fictional characters Tommy and Gina.
Yep.
Everybody knows Tommy and Gina. That couple, Tommy and Gina, were also mentioned in two subsequent Bon Jovi songs on later albums. Do you know the songs?
I know they're mentioned in "It's My Life," but I have no idea what other song they're mentioned in. So I get half credit.
Okay. Partial credit, yes. "It's My Life" in 2000 definitely had the lyric, "This is for the ones who stood their ground." It's for Tommy and Gina, who never backed down.
Yep.
And they also made an appearance on 99 in the Shade from 1988's New Jersey album.
Oh, okay. See, I don't like New Jersey very much, so that's probably why I don't know that.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, hit me with another one.
Okay. Let's stick around that time frame in late 80s, 1988, Winger. Winger released their self-titled debut album in 1988, but some people might not know that prior to that, the band originally went by another name until they changed it at the last minute at the suggestion of Alice Cooper. If you look really closely at their debut album cover, their original name is actually printed on it. What was it?
Sahara.
Yes. Yeah. I remember I read that, I don't know how many years ago, and I immediately went and ran to the album cover, and there it was. And I never noticed it.
I never noticed it either. Yeah, I remember reading that a long time ago, and then I did the same exact thing. I'm like, bullshit, it's not on there. And then I looked, and I'm like, oh yeah, it is on there. But, well, what are you going to do? I think they made a good move. Winger was more distinct of a name, so.
It was definitely more hair metal, if you can say such a thing.
So, Coverdale Page. What Coverdale Page song did Plant and Page play live in 1995? So they took a song from that album and they actually played it with Plant and Page. What is it?
It's got to be one of the two big ones, right? I would think, or else I'm going to fail this.
I don't know, man.
I don't remember them playing the song, so I'm going to have to guess. I'm going to guess it's got to be Pride and Joy, right?
It's actually Shake My Tree.
Oh, that was the second guess. That's actually my favorite song on the album, Shake My Tree, for sure. Pride and Joy was the bigger radio single. That was an interesting album, wasn't it?
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I thought it was a unique thing. For me, something was just a little, it was exactly what you think it would be. It was an exact merging of Whitesnake and Led Zeppelin.
Yep.
But in some places, you kind of hear it and you're thinking, well, I wish the Whitesnake elements of this song would be a little more Led Zeppelin, or vice versa.
Yes.
And somehow they came together, but I don't know that they exactly merged. But I still like the record, and certainly, it had some great musicianship and some great songs, especially those two. Take a look at yourself. The Page guitar solo in that is, some of the best playing I've heard him do. Same with Whisper a Prayer for the Dying. It's a great record. Yep. Definitely.
How about we do one more? Go ahead.
Okay, let's see. One more.
We'll do one more each.
What can I ask that would be? Okay. Let's stick with the big moments in the genre. Cherry Pie. Everybody knows the song Cherry Pie.
Yes.
God bless it. 1990, big hit. One of the most popular and defining songs of the hair metal genre, for better or worse. You're familiar with it, I'm sure. The song opens with kind of a slow-building scream that the listener would naturally assume the vocal was lead singer Janie Lane. But it wasn't. Who was it?
I got this from your book. This was one of those things I did not know. So, and I didn't want to say it because I don't like spoiling things. I want people to buy the book and read it themselves. But it's Dee Snider.
It is Dee Snider. Now, if you ever talk to Bo Hill, because I never have, and I've heard podcasts with him. In fact, he just did one He just did a podcast in the last couple of days.
Yeah, he did.
Someone needs to ask him why he chose to list that from Twisted Sister's Love Is for Suckers album.
So weird.
Not only is it the title, but it's an exact snippet that he decided to. I mean, why did he do that? I don't know. I'd love to know someday.
That is crazy. Yeah, once again, those are things I had no idea. So like I said, here I am thinking I'm, Mr. Glam Metal, Hair Metal, I know everything, but there was a lot of stuff I did not know. Okay, here we go. Last question.
If you got that from the book, hold on. If you got this from the book, I'll give you a bonus question related to Cherry Pie. You probably get this in the book too.
Okay, I'll give it to me.
Who played the guitar solo on Cherry Pie? Hint: it was not a member of Warren.
Okay, well, I'm probably gonna bone this one because I'm having trouble. I know that. Well, just as a side thing, I know that somebody else played the solos on the first 2 albums, and I can't remember what his name was. He's like a session guy, but I want to say, did somebody from Kingdom Come play the solo?
It was CeCe DeVille.
Oh, CeCe DeVille. Oh, that's right. That's right. That was in the book. You're right. I do remember that.
He wasn't in the video, and you're right. On the first album, the Warren guitarists did not play the solos, only because the producers thought they were still learning their craft, and they were trying to compete with the Eddie Van Halens and the Steve Vais of the time. And he said, "Hey, we got to get some help here." It was actually Mike Slammer that came in and played all the guitar solos.
Yep. That's right. I do remember that from the book now, and that's jogging my memory. Okay, here's the last one. What hair band had a song in the movie Father Like Son starring Dudley Moore in 1987?
I know this too.
Come on, Chris, you know it.
But I have heard that before, and I have read that before, but it's not going to come to me.
I'll sing a line of it. She never looked that good for me. All right. May not be the best rendition, but ring a bell?
Actually, I'm impressed with your tone. That was pretty good. But I apologize. It probably didn't come through clear enough. I'm going to fail you on this one.
Okay. It was autographed.
Oh, yes, that's true. Okay, fair enough. That was a good one.
Yeah, well, dude, that was great. Isn't that great fun? Because I think we just both proved that we are hair metal nerds, for sure.
Oh, self-professed. Actually, I'm not a hair metal nerd. I'm kind of a hair metal super nerd. So.
Well, Chris, man, it was so awesome to talk with you about this book. I'm so glad that I got the book and I read it, and I really recommend everybody out there to read it as well. Where's the best place for somebody to get the book, Chris?
Hey, first of all, thank you for your interest in the book. I'm really glad you like it. I can only hope that I did justice, to the artist and this great genre of music. The book can be picked up at Amazon, of course, The Rise, Fall, and Rebirth of Hair Metal, or you can go to my website, www.hairmetalforever.com.
Awesome.
I certainly appreciate the support, Mike. It's a lot of fun talking with you. Let's do it again sometime. I got a bunch more trivia for you.
Definitely. I'm definitely looking to shake it up. Like I said, I did about 50 pretty straightforward episodes, and now I'm looking forward to just doing some more weird stuff. I'm trying to let my creative brain go crazy and try to do some wild things. So, yeah, we'll definitely do something again, man. Thanks a lot for your time.
Okay, thank you. Have a good one.
Yep, take care, Chris.
Well, that was a great episode with Chris. I don't know who won. Was it me? Was it him? I don't know. It was a good time. Hope you enjoyed it. Well, hey, lots of great things are going on in the 80s Glam Metalcast. Tons of new videos. Father to son metal reactions. Keep an eye open for the Pretty Boy Floyd reaction that's coming this week. Also, great interview with Bill Leverty from Firehouse is also on the way. There's one thing you got to do so you don't miss any of it. Subscribe. Rock on.